I'd like to talk today about decency. Now, this might be a somewhat long and rambling video because I want to cover a lot of territory and make sure that my meaning is understood. Because decency can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but I believe at the very least that it has a very core principle to it, and that's what we're going to get to today. So, in the wake of the shooting in Parkland, Florida, there are a lot of theories coming out, a lot of things coming out. And a lot of them do not have very much clout, very much integrity, very much decency to them. Such as this person, David Hogg. It is being suggested that he is a crisis actor. Now, I do believe that crisis actors exist. Every sort of person exists. And so crisis actors, by that nature, have to exist. But as far as I can tell, David Hogg is certainly not one of them. He has been seen in videos from California and has been seen in a yearbook from California and is then discussed showing up in the, at Parkland in the massive survivors. And people are like, well, how could he have been in California and Florida? Well, let's get simple here. He probably got in a car and drove at some point. Okay? I used to live in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. Now, I'm here in the southwestern United States, Arizona. And it's wonderful here, by the way. Though, it was pretty lovely up there. The neighborhood I was in wasn't particularly lovely. That's a lot of L's. That absolutely destroyed me. Let's continue on. Okay, so the reality of the fact is, David Hogg lived in California for much of his early life and then moved to Florida and has since returned there at least once, as we see in a video about the surfer putting his boogie board on top of the trash can. He's visited at least once, okay? Gone to see his old friends. Who wouldn't do that? And who, having the means, doesn't do that pretty regularly? I know that when I have the means, I'd like to go up to Toronto to visit my friends. Does that mean I am a crisis actor if something happens in Toronto, knowing that my address is here in the United States? Continuing on. Okay, so then we have a lot of people coming out for and against the Second Amendment. And the arguments are just really getting out there. I see a lot of people saying that if you want the Second Amendment, you can't possibly care about the children. You want to see children die. That doesn't seem reasonable at all. Those who protect the Second Amendment, David Hogg being one of them, even though he's in these videos talking about removal of AR-15s, those who support the Second Amendment support it because it is their staunch belief that having a weapon within your possession and on your person will make you safer in the face of such great adversity as, say, a person coming to shoot up the area that you're in. I, for one, agree. Now, of course, there are a lot of things that come into play. The 20-foot rule. That's a big one. Does anyone know the 20-foot rule? If you are within 20 feet of someone, essentially your gun is considered as effective as whatever melee weapon they may be carrying. Now, the truth is, yes, the 20-foot rule exists, has been proven multiple times. It's real. It's verifiable. It has been verified over and done. Okay? So, we're not arguing that. What we are arguing is this. The shooter could have been picked off from 80 feet away by somebody with a firearm. Clearly not the guard that was in the car outside of the school waiting out his retirement, but that's another matter. That's another bit of decency and integrity that I'm not even going to bother covering here. What I am saying, however, is that having a gun on campus might have gone pretty far to mitigate the damage, to limit the number of people killed to 4 or 5, even 10. Sure better than the number that there was, isn't it? I mean, and that's exactly it right there. There have been mass shootings that were started and ended because somebody in the crosshairs of the shooter's weapon happened to be carrying a gun and popped off the shooter. You don't hear about them, but they happen. You don't hear about them because that's not the narrative that the media at large is attempting to push. In fact, right now, there's another fight of decency going on as CNN is lobbying YouTube in an attempt to remove independent news sources. They're trying to get rid of InfoWars. Now, quite frankly, I understand why people would be against InfoWars. I was for quite some time. They used to be at roughly the level of the Weekly World News. I mean, people still make fun of Alex Jones talking about them putting the chemicals in the water that turn the frogs gay. I mean, it's a real thing. And I hope that Alex Jones was at least somewhat accurate. A little bit. Anyways, continuing on. InfoWars recently, and Breitbart as well, they've kind of been hitting the nail on the head. They have honed their craft and they have been developing their means of journalism, of investigation, and they're not really going by hearsay anymore. Their thought pieces are good and provoking, and their actual news pieces are more accurate than they used to be. Now, I'm not saying that they are a bastion of, news integrity, but I am saying this. This used to be the news media, and this used to be InfoWars and Breitbart. It's getting a little closer. It's kind of more like this now. And soon, if things keep shifting, it's going to go like this. It's kind of inevitable. And I mean, that's evolution. But a lot of people don't like it, including CNN. CNN, which has been proven in the past to be receiving money heavily from the Clintons and the DNC at large. And CNN, who is now lobbying YouTube to try to stop InfoWars. This doesn't speak of integrity to me. If you have to silence your opponent, it is you who have the problem. If you have to silence the person arguing against you, it's probably because your arguments are not strong enough. to fight them. Instead, you need to actually silence them. That alone tells me everything I need to know about the CNN YouTube InfoWars mix-up. And that tells me a lot about everything, really. You know what? I just remembered something. About a week ago, I got a warning from Facebook. I had posted a picture of the shooter at Parkland wearing a shirt with communist symbols on it. I was warned that I would be banned if I continued to do it, and in the meantime, they removed that one. That is silencing. Now, having dug a little, I have not seen anything that suggested that the person wearing the communist symbols was not the shooter. Who I'm not going to name, by the way. Naming the shooters and showing their faces is super trashy and needs to be done away with, because that is a huge mitigating factor. A huge encouraging factor when it comes to mass shooters. They want that glory. They want to be newsworthy, especially the ones who don't just shoot themselves after they've committed their crime. Continuing on. Silencing your opponent shows very little integrity, shows very little ability to be decent. Instead, it shows that might is right, and that you're going to use all of the powers at your disposal to ensure that your opponent can't speak, because you cannot argue against them. What else is there? There was the whole thing about Dinesh D'Souza. He was essentially making fun of the survivors of Parkland. You know, when he said, he showed that picture of them crying after the Second Amendment revision proposal got shot down. And they're all crying, the one girl covering her face. And he said, you know, this is the worst thing since their parents told them to get summer jobs. Now, pretty insensitive. At the same time, somewhat funny. Because, in truth, these are little kids pushing a narrative. And they're not doing it themselves. They're being told to by groups of adults who, again, have no integrity. They are insisting on using children to push their narrative. That's sketchy. That's trashy. That's not okay. Beyond that, anyone who uses children, wasn't there a quote? Wasn't it some congresswoman way back in the day in the 90s, and everybody was using it since? Oh, won't somebody think of the children? I mean, that's the reality we live in these days. Every time something happens, somebody drags out some child. Give me a sec. Doing a check on something. Okay. It's insane that we don't immediately see through it and call them out on it. To use children as pawns is unacceptable. I mean, weren't we railing against the what was it, the God's Army over in Africa, where the one guy recruited all children to walk around carrying guns and raiding villages? I mean, that's real, people. That's real indecency. He knew that they wouldn't defend themselves violently against children, and so he used them to further his own ends. I know there's a lot more that I could say, but this is getting long-winded, and for some reason I am forgetting more points than I'm remembering. I really need to start writing this down. I really need a better studio at some point. I'm really going to have to get this set up. You can help me with that by liking and subscribing. Of course, I've got this watermark here now. Helps you subscribe. Just click on it. In the meantime, if you have any comments for me, any ideas for me, any kind or harsh words for me, please use the comments section. That's what it's there for. And chances are, I'm going to reply to you, even possibly very quickly. Beyond that, I don't know what else to bring to this discussion, except if I had one of my kids here, I might drag them in front of the camera, let a little tear slide from my eye. I would tell you to please think of the children. And smash that mother father subscribe button.